Please don't take my brother away. Please. Early mornings in Briarpoint always wore a thin veil of mist, as if the sea had pulled a shawl over its shoulders. Salt air clung to the skin, gull cries stitched the sky with tiny needles, and the scent of fish from the harbor drifted down every back street. Officer Ethan Ward switched off his radio, stepped out of his patrol car, and stood still for a few seconds, listening for the sound he thought he'd heard. It wasn't the rumble of a delivery truck or the metallic slam of a shop door, but a thin, frayed cry, like a piece of thread about to snap. He moved toward the narrow alley behind the row of Cedar Street shops. There, behind trash bins and cardboard boxes, he saw something that caught in his chest. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, hair tangled with salt, sneakers split at the heel, dragging a plastic bag full of empty cans. Strapped to her chest with a frayed blanket was a newborn, breathing with a faint, rattling sound. Lips pale, the cry so weak it was barely the shadow of a cry. She saw the uniform and the badge glinting on his chest. She froze, clutching the baby tighter, and spoke in a voice rough and steady beyond her years. "Please don't take my brother away. Please." Ethan crouched down, bringing his eyes level with hers. He'd been trained to watch hands, to watch waistlines, to note anything that could be a threat. But here, the only thing in those small hands was the edge of a blanket, fingers tinged purple from cold. "What's your name?" he asked, voice as soft as setting down a glass. Maya Carter. My brother's name is Noah. He's been coughing all night." Ethan scanned the alley quickly. No adults, no parked car waiting nearby. Just a flattened cardboard box serving as a shelter, a few food scraps left from the night before, and chalk lines fading on the cement, drawn into the shape of a house with a fence. He swallowed hard. "Are you cold, Maya?" he asked. "No," Maya said quickly, then instinctively pulled the blanket higher over Noah. She lied. Her teeth were chattering. But in front of a stranger, she would only admit the truth about Noah. "He's cold, but he'll be okay if he gets warm. Yesterday I gave him my jacket." Ethan extended his hand, moving as slowly as a turning tide. "Can I hold Noah for a second? I just need to check how he's breathing." Maya hesitated, her wide brown eyes fixed on his. She nodded only when she saw he wasn't looking away. "But you can't take him without me. I promise." Noah was feather light, like a bundle of seaweed fresh from the shore, but the weight of worry in Ethan's hands was heavy. The baby's breath rasped, lungs rattling like crumpled paper. He needed a doctor, now. Ethan keyed his radio, called for assistance, then bent toward Maya. "We're going to the hospital. You and Noah will both come with me. There'll be a nurse to make you warm, okay?" Maya gripped the strap of the trash bag. "I have to bring this. They give money for empty cans." "We can come back for it later. Right now your job is to walk next to me." On the way to the car, Ethan draped a silver rescue blanket over her shoulders. In the morning fog, it caught the light, making her look like a small flame moving through the cold. Maya glanced back at the alley, as if making sure the chalk-drawn house was still there. Then she climbed into the back seat, never taking her eyes off Noah. The hospital was just a few streets away, small with few beds, but it had Dr. Lydia Brooks, a woman Ethan trusted to place a hand on a patient's forehead and listen as if the whole room were holding its breath. And it had Clara Jensen, a social worker with a light step, quick hands, and patient eyes. Lydia was already at the door when they arrived. "How old is the baby?" she asked, listening with a stethoscope. "I don't know," Maya said, worry etched into her voice. "Mom said Noah came on a windy night. That's how she tells it." Lydia gave Ethan a quick look. Weak pulse, crackles in the lungs, bluish lips. "Room 2. We need warm air, meds, and special formula." She turned to Maya, voice low. He'll be right here with you. We're just helping him breathe better. Maya stood at the bedside, eyes locked on every move. When the tiny oxygen tube was fixed in place, she inhaled as if she herself had been given permission to breathe. Clara arrived while Lydia was making notes. She sat in a plastic chair across from Maya, placing a warm cup of milk in the girl's hands. I'm Clara. I want to hear your story, the way you want to tell it. No rush, no interruptions, okay? Maya nodded. She glanced at the cup, then slid it toward Ethan. For you? You carried Noah all the way. I already have coffee, Ethan smiled. It's yours. She sipped, as if it were the most precious thing she'd had all day. Then she began to talk. Her voice sounded like footsteps on wet sand. She told of a white-painted house by the lighthouse at the edge of town, the broken fence, how her mother Isabel worked night shifts at a shipyard in another state, how her mother said she needed time to get the papers and would come back for her and Noah to live somewhere with sunshine all year, how her father Mark used to fix boats at the docks until her grandfather died, how he grew quiet, said he had something important to fix, and left the house. 3 days, then 5. When the winter wind came, the bread on the kitchen table was gone. She wrapped Noah in the blanket Mom left and took him behind the shops to find scrap paper and empty cans. I know what to do if Noah cries, Maya recited, like from a lesson. Hold him on my shoulder, pat gently, hum like the waves. Give him tiny sips of warm water. Cover his ears when trucks are loud. Mom taught me. Ethan felt a coldness in his spine, not from the sea wind, but from the gaps in the story. Gaps left by grown-ups. Lydia returned, face less tense. Noah's responding well to warm air. We'll watch him for a few more hours, then start feeding. She looked at Maya. Your brother's brave. Thanks to you, he made it through the night. Maya's eyes lit up for the first time that morning. But joy brushed against the edge of fear, and she clutched the blanket. You won't take him without me, right? No one's taking him without you, Clara said, voice steady as a tied rope. But to keep you both safe, I need to know where you've been staying. The house by the lighthouse, can you show us? Maya nodded, but only if Noah could see her before she left. Lydia smiled, lifted the oxygen tube, and let Maya lean down to whisper in her brother's ear. Noah, I'm going to find our house. I'll be right back. No one's taking you. They left just as the sun pushed over the horizon. Briar Point emerged with low rooftops, old lamp posts, and faded shop signs. At the far end of the street, the lighthouse's shadow cut into the sky like a pin holding the morning's edge. The white-painted house sat behind the broken fence, windows taped in an X, a weathered "For Rent" sign in the yard. Ethan knocked. No answer. Clara had already called the landlord for permission to enter for investigation. The lock was loose, the door opening with a low groan. No furniture, just the smell of salt, old wood, and the traces of a life pulled up by the roots. Maya ran straight to the last room in the hall. On the wall, beneath peeling paint, were crayon stick figures of 4 people and a grinning dog. Next to them, penciled lines marked heights, stopped halfway through a month. Maya touched the smallest figure. Noah only got 1 line. Clara noticed a floorboard was loose. Beneath it, a sealed plastic box. Maya's face brightened. It was her mother's memory box. Inside, a bundle of letters bound with elastic, a photo of 4 people in front of this house, a few bills, and a yellow envelope marked in careful handwriting, for Maya and Noah, if Mama is late. Clara took a breath, glanced at Ethan, and opened it. My dearest Maya and Noah, Clara read softly. If you're reading this, it means I'm not back yet. I haven't left you. I'm working far away to prepare a home with sunlight, a garden, and laughter. I need to get papers so we can all be safe. I asked Dad to care for you for a few weeks. If he gets too sad and slows things down, remember to call Aunt Teresa. Her address is on the back of the photo." Maya sank onto the floor, hands resting neatly on her knees like a little soldier who'd just received orders. "Mama said she'd come back." "I knew it." Ethan flipped over the photo, in faint pencil. Teresa Morales, Savannah, Georgia. A phone number, an email address. Clara tucked the papers into her folder. "We're calling her now." 5 rings. Then a warm, slightly raspy voice. "This is Teresa." "Who is this?" "Your niece Maya is here with me," Clara said. "And baby Noah's at the hospital, getting good care. We need to talk." Silence, then an exhale. "I haven't heard from Isabel in 3 weeks. I thought she was just working nights. Oh my God, the kids!" "Can you come to Briar Point?" Ethan asked. "As soon as possible. I'm leaving right now." When they stepped out, the wind had picked up. Maya looked back at the broken fence, the taped windows, the wall drawings. "We'll paint it again," she said, not sure if to the house or to the future. Back at the hospital, Lydia reported Noah's breathing had eased. He'd taken a few sips of formula. Maya stood beside the crib, telling him about the lighthouse, the chalk lines, the memory box. Noah's eyes stayed open longer, his tiny hand reaching as if to catch her voice. Clara pulled Ethan into the hallway. "Good news. We have Aunt Teresa, and letters proving Isabel's working on her papers. Bad news. Child Services just got an anonymous report about 2 abandoned minors. They'll open a case." Ethan looked through the glass at the 2 children. He remembered too many cases swallowed by procedure, where paperwork tore a family apart faster than any storm. "We get ready," he said. "Lydia will document everything. I'll write my full report from the moment I found them. Call Teresa about emergency guardianship." At that moment, Ethan's radio crackled. A colleague's voice from the docks. "Ward, you free? There's a guy sleeping in the old container shed, asking about a girl named Maya. Says he's got to find her." Ethan and Clara exchanged a look. In the hospital room, Maya was smiling at Noah, completely unaware another door in her story had just creaked open at the far end of town, where salt wind and diesel mixed. "Mark Carter," Ethan murmured. "Maybe he's back." "Or maybe he never really left, just got lost in his own grief," Clara said. Ethan nodded, pulse sinking with the sound of waves outside. "I'll head to the docks. You stay with Maya. If it's Mark, we'll bring him in, but only if he's ready to hear his daughter." He went back into the room, crouched to Maya's level. "Maya, I have to go to the docks. Someone's looking for you. I'll be back soon." "Who?" she asked. He weighed truth against fear, then said, "Might be your dad." She didn't blink. Only the silver blanket on her shoulders trembled like the sea before wind. "If it's Dad," she said, "tell him I'm not as little as I was in the summer. I know how to ask questions grown-ups have to answer." Ethan smiled. "I'll tell him." He walked quickly down the hall, hand already on his radio. At the far end, a window was open a crack, letting in the first stripe of morning sun. In the room behind him, Lydia adjusted the oxygen tube, Clara wrote notes, and Maya hummed the wave song to her brother. Out at sea, a buoy bell tolled low and long. At the container yard, in the draft between steel walls, a man sat with an old backpack holding a battered notebook. On the cover, written in clumsy pencil, "For Maya." And that morning in Briar Point, with the mist still clinging and doors still damp, the real story began. The question hung in the air like salt mist, following Ethan all the way to the docks. The container yard was waking up, diesel fumes curling from idling trucks, seagulls circling overhead in ragged loops, the clang of chains against metal. At the far end, A hunched figure sat on an overturned crate, an old backpack at his feet. Mark Carter looked up when Ethan approached. His face was thinner than the photograph in the memory box, his eyes sunken but still holding the same deep brown as Maya's. He gripped a battered spiral notebook with both hands, like it was the only thing keeping him steady. "Do you know where she is?" His voice cracked, low and urgent. "Maya, my daughter, and the baby, Noah." "They're safe," Ethan said carefully. "At the hospital. Your daughter kept your son alive for days." Mark closed his eyes, shoulders curling forward as if bracing for a blow. I thought I'd be back before they even noticed I was gone." "Why didn't you?" Mark swallowed. "After Dad died, I couldn't think straight. Couldn't sleep. I lost my job at the docks. I was trying to find day labor, save enough for bus tickets to Isabel. I thought if I could just get to her, we could all start over. I didn't want them to see me like that." Ethan studied the man for a long moment. He saw shame. Yes, but not the cold detachment of a parent who'd stopped caring. "You need to come with me. They'll want to hear this. And Maya, she has questions you'll have to answer." Back at the hospital, Dr. Lydia Brooks was leaning over Noah's crib, listening to his breathing. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell more easily now, a soft, steady rhythm. Maya stood beside him, one small hand resting on his blanket as if to anchor him to her. "You've been feeding him like this the whole time?" Lydia asked gently. Maya nodded. "Little sips, not too fast, and I hold him so he won't choke. Mama showed me." Lydia glanced at Clara Jensen, who was flipping through intake forms. "She's been doing more than keeping him alive," Lydia murmured. "She's been protecting him with everything she had." Clara set the clipboard down. "Maya, there's someone here you might want to see. But before you do, I need you to know he's been having a hard time. That doesn't excuse leaving you alone, but it might help you understand." Maya's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Is it Dad?" Clara nodded. The door opened, and Mark stepped inside. For a moment, no one spoke. Maya's gaze fixed on him, scanning every detail. The beard that hadn't been there before, the creases at the corners of his eyes, the way his hands kept tightening and loosening on the notebook. "Maya." His voice broke on her name. "You left us," she said, flat and unblinking. "Noah got sick. I had to keep him warm and find food. Why?" Mark's lips trembled. "Because I thought I could fix things faster if I left. I thought I'd come back with enough money to take you both to Mama. I was wrong." Maya didn't move. "Are you still sad?" Mark blinked. "Yes. But I'm getting help now. I'm talking to people who help with the kind of sadness you can't see." Ethan watched the exchange, knowing it was only the first of many conversations they'd need. He also knew time was against them. That afternoon, Clara's phone buzzed. She stepped into the hall to answer, her expression tightening as she listened. When she returned, her voice was clipped. "That was Child Services. They've received an anonymous report, probably from the hospital intake system. They're opening a case. A state investigator will be here in less than 24 hours. The words landed like a stone in the middle of the room. "What does that mean?" Maya asked, clutching Noah closer. "It means," Clara said gently, "that they'll decide if it's safe for you and Noah to stay with your parents, or if you should go somewhere else for now." Maya's voice rose, panic threading through it. "Somewhere else?" "No. We're together now. We can stay with Aunt Teresa when she gets here. We don't need strangers." "That's exactly what I'll tell them," Clara assured her. "But they'll want proof, stable housing, medical care, someone who can be legally responsible right now." Ethan turned to Mark. Then you need to be honest about everything. Your depression, your work, all of it. If we try to hide anything, they'll assume the worst. Mark nodded slowly, gripping the notebook so hard his knuckles whitened. By evening, Teresa Morales arrived. Stepping into the hospital room with a gust of cold air and the scent of long miles on the road. Her eyes, warm, steady, but shadowed with worry, fell first on Maya, then on Noah. In 2 strides, she was kneeling, pulling them both into her arms. "My brave girl," she whispered in Spanish. "You've done more than anyone should have to at your age." Maya buried her face against Teresa's shoulder. "Can you keep us, even if they try to take us?" Teresa looked over the top of Maya's head at Clara and Ethan. "If it comes to that, I'll petition for emergency guardianship. They're family. They stay with me." Ethan felt a flicker of relief, but it was quickly chased by the knowledge that tomorrow would bring scrutiny, paperwork, and a stranger's judgment on whether this fragile reunion could last. That night, long after the hospital halls had quieted, Maya sat in a chair beside Noah's crib, watching him sleep. The silver rescue blanket was folded in her lap, its crinkled surface catching the faint glow from the monitor. "Tomorrow," she whispered to her brother, "we have to show them we're worth keeping together." She didn't notice Ethan in the doorway, but he heard every word. And as he stood there, he realized that for all the official reports and legal arguments they could make, the truth was as simple as the small girl guarding the crib. This was a family fighting to stay whole. And in less than 24 hours, someone who'd never held Noah, never heard Maya's wave song lullaby, would decide if that fight was enough. The morning came wrapped in the pale gray of a harbor town sky, the kind of light that flattened shadows and made everything look washed thin. Ethan Ward stood outside the hospital, coffee cooling in his hand, while Teresa Morales filled out temporary caregiver paperwork inside. Clara Jensen stepped out to join him. "Teresa's solid," she said. "She's got a home, steady income, no criminal record. If Child Services wants an immediate placement, she's our best shot." "And Isabel?" Ethan asked. Clara shook her head. "No contact yet. Teresa says she's been working night shifts, which makes calls harder. But if Isabel's been trying to get her paperwork straight, we might find proof of it in that house Maya described." Ethan drained the last of his coffee. "Then we go see it today, before the state does." Maya didn't want to leave Noah, not even for an hour. But when Dr. Lydia Brooks promised to keep him close to her station, she relented. Teresa stayed behind with the baby, brushing his fine hair back from his forehead as he slept. The police cruiser rolled through Briar Point's narrow streets, the lighthouse coming into view like a white exclamation mark at the edge of the world. They turned down a side road that narrowed to cracked asphalt and seagrass before stopping in front of a weathered white house. The fence leaned in places, broken slats like missing teeth. The windows were crisscrossed with strips of old duct tape, and a "For Rent" sign sat crooked in the front yard, its lettering faded. "That's it," Maya said quietly from the back seat. Inside, the air was cold and smelled faintly of salt and something sweet that had been left too long. The rooms were bare, no furniture, just patches on the walls where pictures had once hung. A few forgotten toys lay in corners, dulled with dust. Maya moved with purpose, heading straight down the hall to the last door. "My room," she said. It was small, the kind of space that could feel cramped or cozy depending on the day. On one wall, faint crayon marks formed stick figures, 4 people and a smiling dog. Beside them, penciled height lines climbed a few inches before stopping. Maya touched the smallest figure. "That's Noah. He only got 1 line before everything changed." Ethan's eyes scanned the floor. One of the boards near the corner was loose. He knelt, pried it up, and pulled out a small plastic box sealed tight. Maya's face lit up. Mama's memory box. She told me if something happened, I should remember the big rock in the garden. She must have moved it inside before we left. Clara set the box on the windowsill and opened it. Inside was a bundle of letters bound with a rubber band, a photograph of the four of them standing in front of this very house, a few bills, and a yellow envelope. On the envelope, in careful handwriting, for Maya and Noah, if Mama is late. Clara glanced at Ethan, then read aloud, "My dearest Maya and Noah, if you are reading this, it means I'm not back yet. I haven't left you. I'm working far away to prepare a home with sunlight, a garden, and laughter. I need to get the right papers so we can all be safe. I asked Daddy to care for you for a few weeks. If he gets too sad and slows things down, call Aunt Teresa. Her address is on the back of the photo. Remember, my love for you is bigger than the ocean. Mama." Maya's hand stayed folded neatly in her lap as Clara read, but her eyes glistened. I knew she wouldn't just leave. Ethan flipped the photograph over. In faint pencil, Teresa Morales, Savannah, Georgia, along with a phone number and email address. Clara tucked the papers carefully back into the box. A glint of something else caught Ethan's attention. Another envelope. This one postmarked just 2 weeks ago and addressed to Mark Carter. Inside was a short letter from Isabel. I'm getting closer. Work is steady. The lawyer says the papers should be ready in 2 more weeks. Tell the kids I'll be home soon. Ethan's jaw tightened. So, she was counting on him right up until... He didn't finish. The conclusion was obvious. As they stepped back outside, the wind off the water had picked up, rattling the loose slats of the fence. Maya walked slowly to the edge of the yard, where a massive rock sat half-buried near what had once been a small garden. She knelt beside it, tracing the grooves in its surface. Mama showed me once, she said. Said if I ever needed to find something important, it would be here. I guess she moved the box inside because of the rain. Clara crouched beside her. That's how you knew to look under the floorboard? Maya nodded, a small, proud smile flickering over her face. Back at the hospital, Teresa was still with Noah, humming softly. She looked up as they entered. Find anything? Clara set the memory box on the table. Proof that Isabel's been working to bring them back together. Letters, job information, the contact you gave us. Ethan added, and a recent letter to Mark. She thought he was holding things together. Teresa's expression darkened. Then Child Services needs to see this before they start making decisions. That night, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the memory box open in front of him. Outside, the lighthouse beam swept across the harbor every few seconds, steady as a heartbeat. He thought about Maya's small voice reading her mother's words, about the stubborn hope in her eyes. The state would see a case file full of dates, absences, and risks. Ethan had seen something else, a chain of people. Isabel, Mark, Teresa, even Maya, each trying in their own flawed way to keep the family from slipping apart. But he also knew that tomorrow, none of that might matter, because tomorrow the state's investigator would arrive. Teresa Morales had never been one to waste words. When she stepped into the small family consultation room at Briar Point Hospital the next morning, she didn't bother with pleasantries. I talked to the caseworker, she said, her voice low but steady. They know I'm here. They also know I'm willing to take both kids immediately. Ethan Ward glanced up from his notebook. That might be the safest card we can play right now. Clara Jensen, seated beside him, shook her head. It's not just about where the kids go tonight. The state's looking at the bigger picture, whether Isabel and Mark are fit to parent at all. And until they make that decision, Teresa replied, I'm not letting Maya or Noah spend a single night with strangers. Maya, sitting cross-legged on the couch with Noah in her lap, looked between the adults. Are they still coming to take us? Clara leaned forward. They're coming to decide where you'll stay for a while. But your aunt has already asked to be that place. Maya nodded, as if that settled the matter. Good. Then we don't have to be scared. Ethan wished it were that simple. The knock came at 10:15 a.m., sharp. Paula Green stepped into the room, a woman in her 50s with neat hair, a dark blazer, and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse in the book. She introduced herself with clipped efficiency, shook no one's hand, and opened a folder thick with paperwork. "Let's get to it," Green said. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Morales, Officer Ward, Ms. Jensen, you're all here. Good. I'll begin by reviewing the circumstances that brought the children to state attention." She spoke as if reading from a script. 2 minors were found without adult supervision, the younger displaying signs of malnutrition and respiratory distress. The elder, age 6, had been attempting to provide food and shelter without assistance. Parents were not present. This constitutes neglect under state law. Mark Carter's hands clenched into fists on his knees. "I never stopped caring." Green cut him off without looking up. "You left them unsupervised for an extended period." "I thought I'd be back in a few days. I was trying to—" "Intentions don't change outcomes," Green said, her pen moving briskly over the page. Maya's voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me," she said from the couch. Green looked up, eyebrows arched. "Yes?" "We're not just minors," Maya said, the word awkward in her mouth. "We're me and Noah, and we're not alone now. We have Aunt Teresa, and Mama's coming back, and Dad's here, and I took care of Noah because that's what families do." Green regarded her for a moment longer than necessary, then returned to her notes. "Thank you for speaking, Maya, but my job is to look at facts." Teresa leaned forward. "Then here's a fact. Isabel Carter has been working steady shifts out of state, saving to bring her children to a secure home. We have letters, job records, and proof of legal counsel for her immigration paperwork. And I'm offering immediate family placement with a stable income and housing." Green flipped to a new form. "You're the maternal aunt?" "Yes." "Never contacted by either parent to take the children before this incident?" Teresa's jaw tightened. "No. If I'd known they were alone, I would have been here in a heartbeat. The first I heard was from Ms. Jensen yesterday." Green jotted something, her expression unreadable. "That omission will be noted." By noon, Green had interviewed each adult separately. She spoke with Mark about his depression, with Teresa about her willingness to assume guardianship, and with Ethan about the circumstances of discovery. Then she asked to speak to Maya alone. Clara stayed just inside the doorway as a silent observer. Green's tone softened slightly. "Maya, what's the most important thing to you right now?" Maya didn't hesitate. "That me and Noah stay together, and that Mama and Dad get better so we can be with them again." Green made a small note. "And do you feel safe with your aunt?" "Yes, but I want Mama to know we're okay. And Dad, too." Outside in the hallway afterward, Green snapped her folder shut. "I'll make my preliminary recommendation this evening. Final decision will come from the court. Until then, the children remain with Ms. Morales under supervision." Teresa's relief was tempered by the weight of those last 2 words. Ethan walked her back toward the pediatric wing. "It's not a guarantee," he said quietly, "but it's a foothold. And with Isabel on her way, we might be able to show them this family can stand together." That evening, as the winter sun bled out over the harbor, Ethan drove past the lighthouse on his way home. Its slow, steady beams swept the dark, the way it had for 100 years, marking danger, guiding ships, and reminding the town that some lights are worth keeping lit no matter the weather. He thought of Maya, her small shoulders squared in the face of a stranger's judgment, and of the fragile threads holding this family together. Tomorrow, those threads would be tested again. The next morning smelled of salt, diesel, and thawing rope. A dockside scent Ethan Ward knew by heart. He parked near the long pier, the water below shifting in restless shades of gray-green, and found Mark Carter already waiting at the edge. Mark had shaved, though unevenly, and his jacket was zipped against the wind. In one hand, he clutched the same battered notebook Ethan had seen 2 days earlier. "I couldn't sleep," Mark said, eyes on the water. "Thought you might want to hear the whole story before the court does." Ethan nodded, leaning against the railing. Mark's voice was rough, like an engine that hadn't run in months. "After Dad died, it was like someone turned the sound down on the world. The docks felt empty without him. I couldn't work the same shift without thinking about the way he used to yell at me from the crane." He glanced at Ethan. "I started missing days. First just 1 or 2 a month, then whole weeks. Lost my job." Isabel was already working out of state by then. Her shipyard had openings, but not for me without the right credentials. "She said she'd handle the paperwork for all of us, just needed a few months." "And you were supposed to keep the kids safe," Ethan said. Mark's jaw tightened. "Yeah, and at first I did. But when the bills piled up and the food ran low, I thought, maybe if I could get down to her and show I'd found work, she could pull us all through faster. I told myself I'd leave them just a few days, stay with a buddy, get some money together. I didn't count on that buddy disappearing with half my cash. Or on the jobs falling through, or on the days slipping away without me noticing how long I'd been gone." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You didn't think about how a 6-year-old would feed a baby?" Mark's gaze dropped to the notebook in his hands. "Every night, every morning, I wrote to them here." He flipped the pages, scribbled letters addressed to Maya and Noah. "Eat what's left in the cupboard first. Don't forget the red blanket, the one your mom used. I'm coming back. Just need a little more time." "You should have gone back the second you realized it wasn't working," Ethan said. "I know," Mark admitted. "By then I was ashamed and scared they'd hate me." Back at the hospital, Maya was perched on the edge of Noah's bed, holding a plastic cup of juice. Teresa Morales was folding tiny clothes donated by the pediatric ward. When Ethan entered with Mark, the room went still. Maya looked at her father for a long moment, then said, "You should sit. You look tired." Mark obeyed, sinking into the chair beside her. "I heard you took care of Noah like a pro." "I had to," she replied. "He only likes the song Mama sings, and I'm the only one who knows it." Mark's throat worked. "I'm sorry, Maya." She studied him as if deciding how much of her heart she could risk. "If you get sad again, will you tell someone before you leave?" "Yes," Mark said immediately. "I will. I promise." Later, in the hallway, Teresa joined Ethan. "He's trying," she said quietly. "But the state doesn't look kindly on trying. They want proof, schedules, counseling reports, income statements." "They'll get them," Ethan replied. "Because right now, the only thing keeping those kids here is you." Teresa crossed her arms. "And Isabel. She called me last night. She's leaving as soon as she gets clearance from her job. She wants to walk into that court and fight for them herself." Ethan knew that would be both a blessing and a complication. Isabel's presence could sway the judge or open new questions about why the children were left behind in the first place. That evening, as the winter sun bled gold over the harbor, Mark returned to the docks alone. He sat on the same crate, notebook in his lap, writing another letter to his children. This one began differently. "Dear Maya and Noah, this time I'm writing to tell you where I am, what I'm doing, and how I'll never leave without saying goodbye again." He tore out the page and folded it into his jacket pocket. Tomorrow, the state's investigator would decide whether his children stayed in the family. and Mark Carter intended to be ready to answer every question, no matter how much it hurt. The call came just after dawn. Teresa Morales was pouring coffee in the hospital family lounge when her phone buzzed with an out-of-state number. She answered on the first ring. "It's me," Isabel's voice came, breathless and thin. "I'm on the road. I left right after my shift. I should be there by late afternoon." Teresa pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "Are you sure you're up for that drive? I don't care," Isabel cut in. "I need to see them. I've missed so much already." By mid-morning, the pediatric ward was alive with quiet anticipation. Maya had brushed her hair twice and insisted on wearing the donated sweater with the tiny lighthouse stitched over the heart. Noah, now more alert, was busy trying to grab the drawstrings of Ethan Ward's jacket as he leaned over the crib. "She's coming today?" Maya asked for the third time. Ethan smiled. "That's the plan." Maya looked down at her brother. "Then we're not letting go once she gets here." But the day's warmth soured just after lunch when Paula Green returned to the hospital, file folder under her arm, expression the same unreadable shade of gray as the winter sky. "I've spoken with my supervisor," Green announced in the consultation room. "Unless the court sees significant proof of stability from both parents, my recommendation will be long-term placement with Ms. Morales." Teresa folded her arms. "They have that proof. You'll have it in front of you when Isabel walks in that courtroom." Green's gaze was cool. "Ms. Carter has been absent for 2 months. Working out of state is not the same as parenting, and Mr. Carter's recent history—" "I'm not hiding it," Mark interrupted from his chair in the corner. "I've been in counseling. I have the records. I was sick in the head and I'm getting better." Green simply made another note in her folder. By the time Isabel's dusty silver sedan pulled into the parking lot at 4:07 p.m., the temperature had dropped, and a thin wind scoured the harbor. Ethan stood by the entrance ready to guide her in. When she stepped out of the car, Isabel looked smaller than Teresa remembered. Thinner, hair pulled back under a knit cap, eyes ringed with exhaustion. But the moment she saw Ethan, her first words tumbled out. "Where are they?" Inside the pediatric ward, the air shifted. Maya, perched on the edge of Noah's bed, froze for half a second. Then she slid off and ran. "Mama!" Isabel caught her halfway across the floor, pulling her into an embrace so fierce it made Maya squeak. Tears ran down Isabel's cheeks, soaking into her daughter's hair. "My baby girl, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Noah was next, Teresa lifting him from the crib and passing him into Isabel's arms. The baby's initial confusion gave way to a gummy smile, his fingers closing around the edge of her sleeve. "Hi, my little sailor," Isabel whispered, pressing her face to his. "Mama's got you." For a few minutes, the rest of the world fell away. The years of dockside work, the paperwork delays, the nights Maya spent scavenging, it all seemed to dissolve in the warmth of those small arms around her neck. But the moment couldn't hold. Paula Green stepped into the room. "Ms. Carter," she said crisply, "I'm glad you've arrived, but the timing is difficult. Your hearing is tomorrow, and we have a great deal to review." Isabel straightened but kept Noah balanced on her hip. "Then let's review it now. You'll see I've been working, saving, keeping contact with Teresa." "You left your children in the care of someone who was unstable," Green interrupted. "The court will need to decide if that was neglect." Maya's voice broke in, sharp with the kind of defiance only a child could get away with. "She didn't know, okay? Mama didn't know Daddy was sad like that. She thought we'd be fine until she got back." Green's eyes flicked to Maya, then back to Isabel. "Intentions don't erase harm. You'll both need to show the court a plan, housing, income, childcare, before reunification can be considered. That night, Isabel slept in a cot beside Noah's crib, one hand resting on her daughter's foot. She'd driven over 700 miles on nothing but gas station coffee and the hope that her children wouldn't look at her with blame in their eyes. Ethan found her in the dim light, still awake. "They're going to ask why you didn't come sooner," he said gently. "I'll tell them the truth," Isabel replied. "I thought I was making things better. I didn't know I was making them worse." She looked at him then, steady, without flinching. "But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving without them." The courthouse in Harbor Point did not look like a place where lives were decided. It was a squat brick building by the water, with seagulls circling overhead and a cracked walkway leading to glass doors that smelled faintly of seaweed when they opened. But to Maya, walking between her parents for the first time in months, it might as well have been the gates to a kingdom where grown-ups decided who belonged to whom. Ethan Ward waited at the entrance, coat collar turned up against the wind. He nodded once at Isabel, then at Mark, as if to remind them that whatever private battles they still had would have to wait. Inside, the hallways were narrow, lined with beige tile and old photographs of shipyards from decades past. They passed people clutching manila folders, lawyers in dark suits speaking in low tones, a young mother with a baby strapped to her chest and eyes full of storm. Courtroom 2 smelled of paper and dust. The heating system groaned overhead. At the front, Judge Eleanor Shaw adjusted her glasses and scanned the docket. Her face was neither kind nor cruel. It was the face of someone who had learned to keep her own feelings locked away from the weight of other people's stories. Paula Green was already there, seated at the long table for Child Protective Services. She had a stack of files, each tabbed and marked in precise handwriting. Isabel and Mark sat at the opposite table, Teresa beside them as a witness. Maya clung to Isabel's hand until the bailiff gently told her she'd need to sit in the gallery. Ethan took a seat in the back row, not as a participant, but as the quiet anchor they all needed. The hearing began with Green's voice, smooth but clipped. "Your Honor, this case concerns Maya Carter, age 6, and Noah Carter, age 1. In December, they were found alone in an apartment without adequate heat, food, or supervision. The father had been absent for over a week. The mother was working in another state. Temporary custody was placed with Ms. Teresa Morales." Green outlined Mark's mental health records, his job loss, Isabel's prolonged absence, and the department's concerns about stability. Her tone never rose, but every word landed like a small stone in the still water of the courtroom. When it was Isabel's turn, she stood straight, though her hands gripped the edge of the table. "I did not abandon my children," she began. "I was working double shifts in another state to earn enough for better housing. I left them with their father because I believed they'd be safe. I didn't know he was struggling like that. If I had known, I would have come back immediately." Her voice trembled, but she kept going. "Since then, I've secured a year-long contract at the shipyard with benefits. I have a place to live. I can prove every paycheck, every payment. All I want is to bring my kids home." Mark rose next. He did not try to defend what he had done. He admitted it plainly. "I failed," he said, looking at the judge, not at the floor. "I thought I could fix things before anyone noticed, but I made it worse. I've been in counseling every week since. I've been sober for 4 months. I'm back at work on the docks, and my supervisor will vouch for me. I'm not the man who left that apartment cold and empty." Teresa was the last to speak. "I'm not here to take these children away from their parents," she told the court. "I've seen the love they have for Maya and Noah, and I've seen the love returned. My only concern is that the stability they've found with me continues when they go back. If that means gradual reunification with support services, I believe it's worth trying." The judge listened without visible reaction, then leaned back. "This court does not traffic in hopes. It traffics in plans. I will review your documents and testimony. But be aware, If I approve reunification, I will order unannounced home visits for 6 months. One slip, and custody reverts to Ms. Morales immediately. She glanced at Maya, who was watching every word like it was a story she'd have to retell later. We will reconvene in 2 weeks, Judge Shaw concluded. Until then, the children will remain with Ms. Morales under supervised visits by both parents. Outside the courthouse, the wind was sharper than before, whipping at Isabel's scarf. Maya slipped her small hand into Ethan's as they descended the steps. Does this mean we're still not together? Not yet, Ethan said quietly. But it means you're closer. Mark and Isabel stood side by side for the first time all day, watching their daughter walk ahead with Teresa. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Mark said, "We have 2 weeks to prove we're worth trusting." The morning after court, Harbor Point felt colder than usual. Maybe it was just the weight of 2 weeks hanging in the air. For Isabel, the countdown began at 6 o'clock a.m., when she clocked in at the shipyard under a sky the color of steel. Every clang of metal, every blast of the crane horn, reminded her that she wasn't just working for wages anymore. She was working for a life to hand back to her children. For Mark, it began in a folding chair at Harbor Point Recovery Center, where he sat in a circle of other men and women who carried their failures like stones in their pockets. He didn't speak much that morning, but when the counselor asked him to share his goal for the week, he said, "I'm going to make my daughter believe I'm not the same man who left her cold." Teresa kept the household running. She woke Maya for school, fed Noah his oatmeal, and made sure both kids knew when their parents would visit. But the air in the apartment had changed since the court date. More watchful, more careful. Even Maya seemed to sense it. She stopped asking if she could go home tomorrow and started counting days on her fingers. Isabel's visits were at the library after school. She would sit with Maya in the children's section, helping her with homework, then read board books to Noah on the rug. Sometimes she'd bring them snacks from the deli on Main Street, apple slices, peanut butter crackers, chocolate milk in little cartons. Mark's visits were at the park. He'd push Maya on the swings, holding Noah in his arms, telling them stories about the gulls overhead or the cargo ships out in the bay. He never mentioned the apartment or the cold. He just made sure that every laugh sounded whole. Still, there were cracks. One afternoon, Maya asked Isabel, "If the judge says no, will you disappear again?" Isabel's throat closed for a moment. "No, even if we can't live together right away, I'll still be here. I promise." And once, when Mark handed Noah back to Teresa, the baby cried so hard his tiny fists trembled. Mark stood there, helpless, until Teresa said gently, "He just needs time to feel safe with you again." The state didn't make things easy. Paula Green stopped by the shipyard to verify Isabel's employment, visited Mark's tiny apartment to check the locks and the heating, and called Teresa twice to confirm that neither parent had missed a visit. At one point, Green asked Maya in a private meeting if she felt safe with her parents. Maya answered, "Yes, but I feel safest when they're both in the same room." It wasn't an answer Green could put neatly into a form. The Friday before the final hearing, Isabel and Mark met at Ethan Ward's kitchen table. It was the first time they'd sat down together without lawyers or social workers in the room. "We need to show Judge Shaw that we're not just fixing ourselves, we're fixing this family," Isabel said. Mark nodded. "So we show up together tomorrow for the supervised visit. Not just handoffs. Not just you or me." They agreed on it. Not for themselves, but because Maya deserved to see them as a team, even if they weren't sure what team meant anymore. The next afternoon, the library visit felt different. Isabel and Mark both came, sitting side by side on the rug while Noah stacked blocks and Maya worked on a jigsaw puzzle. They asked about her science project, took turns reading from the same book, and even laughed together when Noah knocked over his own block tower. From a distance, Teresa watched with her arms folded. She didn't smile, but the lines in her forehead eased. That night, Maya lay in bed at Teresa's apartment, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. 2 more sleeps, she whispered to herself. She didn't know if those 2 sleeps would bring her home, but for the first time in months, she let herself imagine it without fear. Isabel's answer was steady. Then we don't waste a single day. Harbor Point woke under a gray sky that looked like it had been drawn in charcoal. The sea was restless, slapping against the docks as if it knew today would not be quiet. Inside her borrowed bedroom at Teresa's apartment, Maya dressed in her favorite yellow sweater, the one her mother had sent her last Christmas from another state. She wanted the judge to see her in something bright, even if the world outside felt heavy. Noah was too young to understand the weight of the day. He giggled as Teresa buckled him into his coat, as if this were just another errand. The courthouse steps felt colder than the last time. Isabel and Mark arrived separately but walked through the doors together. They didn't hold hands, but they didn't walk apart either. That in itself was new. Ethan Ward was already in the gallery when they entered courtroom 2. He gave Maya a small nod, the kind adults give when they want to say "I'm here" without speaking out loud. Judge Eleanor Shaw took the bench promptly at 9. She glanced over her notes, the same precise, measured expression on her face. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to acknowledge the work both parents have done in the past 2 weeks. It is not easy to meet the demands of this court while addressing personal challenges. You have both made visible progress." The words landed like a cautious compliment. Paula Green spoke first, reviewing her latest report. Isabel's steady employment, Mark's continued sobriety, both parents' consistent visitation, the absence of missed appointments or negative incidents. But Green's recommendation was careful. "I believe reunification is possible, but it should be phased. Immediate return without monitoring could risk destabilizing the children again." Isabel rose when called. "Your Honor, I understand the risks, but I believe my children deserve to wake up in a home that is theirs, not just visit one. I can provide that home now." Mark spoke after her, looking at the judge but glancing at Maya, too. "I know I broke trust. I can't fix that overnight, but I can show my kids every day that I'm not the man who left them in the cold. I'll take any condition you set." The judge tapped her pen against the file, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "Maya Carter and Noah Carter will be returned to their mother's primary custody," she said at last, "with joint legal custody shared with the father. The father will have visitation rights every weekend, supervised for the next 3 months. Both parents will participate in family counseling, and the department will conduct unannounced home visits for 6 months." Her eyes moved to Maya. "Young lady, I hope this is the last time you have to sit in a room like this." Maya nodded, though her throat was tight. Outside the courthouse, the wind off the harbor was fierce, but Isabel knelt right there on the sidewalk and pulled Maya into her arms. Mark crouched beside them, holding Noah, who patted his sister's shoulder like he somehow knew this moment was different from all the others. Ethan stood a few steps away, hands in his coat pockets, watching the scene. "Looks like you've got work to do," he said quietly to Mark and Isabel. They both nodded. This wasn't an ending. It was the first fragile beginning. The key felt heavier than Isabel remembered. It was just a small brass thing on a plain ring, but as she slid it into the lock of the Harbor Point apartment, her hands trembled. The door opened with a sound like an exhale. Inside, the air still smelled faintly of paint from the fresh coat she'd brushed on the walls the weekend before. The furniture was modest, a second-hand couch, a thrift store coffee table, bunk beds in the children's room, but it was all clean, warm, and waiting. Maya stepped over the threshold first, her eyes wide. "It's ours?" "It's ours," Isabel said, setting her bag down. Mark carried Noah in behind her, setting the toddler on the carpet. Noah crawled immediately toward the toy box in the corner, pulling out a stuffed penguin and holding it high like a prize. Mark stayed by the doorway, his hand resting on the frame. He didn't live here, not yet, but the judge's order allowed him to spend the afternoon helping them settle in. Teresa stood in the hall, smiling faintly as she watched. "Looks like my work here's done," she said, though her voice caught on the words. Isabel hugged her, holding on longer than she meant to. The afternoon unfolded in small, ordinary ways that felt extraordinary to them. Isabel made grilled cheese sandwiches while Maya set the table, carefully laying out mismatched plates. Mark assembled the bookshelf in the kids' room, hammering each dowel in with patient care. When they sat down to eat, the sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, catching the yellow in Maya's sweater and the gold flecks in Noah's hair. For a moment, no one spoke. It was enough just to be here, breathing the same warm air. After lunch, Maya dragged out her box of colored pencils. She and Isabel sat on the floor, drawing flowers for the new fridge. Mark joined them, sketching a crooked sailboat that made Maya laugh. Noah toddled between them, carrying the penguin like an ambassador of peace. They were still under the court's watch, still on a kind of probation. But here, now, the rules felt like scaffolding, not chains. Something to hold them up until they were steady on their own. When the sun began to sink, Mark gathered his coat. He crouched to look Maya in the eye. "I'll be back this weekend," he said. "Same time. You can keep the sailboat until then." Maya nodded, clutching the drawing. "You better finish the mast next time." He smiled, kissed Noah's head, and left. The door closed softly behind him. That night, Isabel tucked Maya into the top bunk and Noah into the crib. She turned off the lamp and sat for a moment in the doorway, listening to the rhythm of their breathing. She thought about the cold apartment months ago, the courthouse, the counting of days. All of it had led here, to a room where her children were warm, safe, and dreaming under the same roof. Ethan's words from the courthouse steps came back to her. "Looks like you've got work to do." Yes, but it was the kind of work she'd been waiting her whole life to start. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. Stories like Isabel, Mark, Maya, and Noah's remind us that family is not just about blood. It's about showing up every day, even when it's hard. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think about second chances, we're grateful you spent this time with us. Your support means we can continue sharing these journeys of hope, resilience, and love. From our hearts to yours, thank you for listening. And remember, even the smallest acts of love can change the course of a life.